emergency.
The Green Council is officially out of session. Long live King Aegon II. But while Alicent and Otto Hightower have managed to achieve their primary objective, they're going to have to spend the rest of the series defending it. Because as you saw at the end of the episode, the Queen Who Never Was has a lot to say. The Black Queen will be filled with emotion, drama, fire and blood as the show has not seen yet. And we're here to break it all down by analyzing the preview. So here's the full breakdown of the preview for House of the Dragon Episode 10, The Black Queen. And spoiler warning before you go any further, because there will be a lot of those in this video. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
The Greens are coming for you, Rhaenyra. And for your children.
The Queen Who Never Was arrives with dire news. It's a very short scene, so if you don't pay attention, you might miss it. But the trailer starts with a shot of Lucerys Velaryon and Arax flying somewhere on a stormy night. We can tell it's Arax because even in such a dark shot, his pearlescent white body is hard to miss. Well, that, and look at how little Luke's saddle looks on Arax's body. It has to be them. As for where they are headed and why, we'll get to that later in the video. The next shot is of Prince Rhaenys Targaryen in a bronze and steel armor arriving at Dragonstone. The Queen Who Never Was tells a pregnant Rhaenyra and Daemon that the Greens are coming for her and her children. It appears as though the trier of Targaryens is standing in the chamber of the painted table, which we will see in more magnificent fashion later on in the trailer. After the title card flashes, we see a shot of Daemon picking up Dark's sister with a white-haired lord standing behind him. This could be Daemon setting off to greet the visitors from King's Landing, or it could also be him departing for war. When the Dance of the Dragons breaks out, the rogue prince flies on ahead by himself and lands Caraxes at the Kingspire Tower of Harrenhal to gather the Riverlanders to his wife's cause. The castle, which belongs to House Strong, immediately yields to Prince Daemon, making this one of the most successful first strikes in Westerosi history.
You cannot bend the knee to the Hightowers. They stole your birthright.
The rogue prince convinces his queen to go to war. The next shot we get is of Dragonstone at night, and the ancient Targaryen citadel looks as gloomy as it does beautiful. Candles light a path towards the fortress, and the night sky somehow makes it look less dreary than it is. We hear Daemon tell Rhaenyra that she cannot bend the knee to the Hightowers as they stole her birthright. We can see Daemon walk off from Rhaenyra yet again, in what looks like the chamber of the painted table. The Black Queen looks distressed here, and the fact that Daemon is urging her to not give up on her claim should tell you that something is wrong. Is Rhaenyra actually considering giving up to Alicent and Aegon? Why would she do that? Well, do you remember that she's going through a pregnancy as all this is happening around her? Good. Keep that in mind. As Daemon is taking his leave of his queen, the trailer abruptly cuts to a shot of his biggest fanboy, Aemond Targaryen. The one-eyed prince is finally going to give us all a peek underneath his eye patch next episode, and it's going to be both epic and creepy, because in Fire and Blood, we learn what Aemon does with his empty eye socket almost as soon as we know that he has one. The prince takes to putting a sapphire in his eye and only wore the eye patch on formal occasions so as to not offend noble ladies with his presence. This implies that Aemon usually keeps his eye open, and we think you'll now understand why we call this both epic and creepy. But why is Aemon taking his eye patch off? And who exactly could be so important or unimportant that he is doing this with such haste? That answer, like many others, will be given later on in this video.
Every man standing round the painted table urges her to plunge the realm into war.
The Black Council convenes. We next see the Black Council in full effect, standing around the painted table built by Aegon the Conqueror and preparing for war. You can see Daemon and Rhaenyra there, along with Jace, Luke, many of House Targaryen's immediate vassals, and 2 members of the King's Guard, who we are guessing are Steffon Darklyn and Laurent Marbrand. While the second King's Guard member's bald head might lead you to believe that he is the dismissed Sir Harold Westerling, we think it's Laurent Marbrand, simply because baldness is not exclusive to Sir Harold, and we don't even know if he will show up at Dragonstone in the first place. It's quite possible that Harold simply returned to his family seat at the Crag and is waiting to see how the war shakes out. out, though his liege lords, the Lannisters, do side with the Greens during the dance. We'll have to wait for the episode to come out, of course, but these are our best guesses. While the War Council is being shown to our eyes, our ears, and met with the worried tones of Princess Rhaenys once again, who was worried that everyone that Rhaenyra has gathered for her council will only urge her to go to war. Rhaenys is a bit hypocritical here when she worries about Rhaenyra and her allies choosing war, because she could have ended it all with one Dracarys last episode, but we suppose a mother's mercy is greater than a dragon's wrath. As for who she is saying this to, it can only be one person, Lord Corlys Velaryon, Lord of the Tides and Master of Driftmark. Recall that in episode 8, the sea snake was already on his way back to High Tide after taking a grievous injury during battle in the Stepstones. He was supposed to arrive in 3 days, and we have to guess that at least that much time did pass between the opening sequence of episode 8 and the ending sequence of episode 9. The sea snake and the queen who never was will be Rhaenyra's closest allies in the dance, of course, but their relationship with their future queen has always been tenuous at best. And after losing both their children, according to them at least, and Corlys having nearly died at the Stepstones, the Velaryons' appetite for ambition might have finally been saturated. But Lord Corlys' ambition got them into this mess in the first place, and it will be on the sea snake to get them out of it as well. We must also give a shout out to the show's production department for creating this beautiful pre-Baratheon iteration of the painted table, which seems to glow as fire is poured into its cracks and crevices. You can see that the shot focuses only on the northern half of Westeros, from the Wall to River Run, and that's because most of Rhaenyra's supporters will come from those lands. As you might have noticed, the Green Council has representatives from 3 of the 7 kingdoms: Jasper Wild from the Stormlands, Tywin Lannister from the Westerlands, and Otto Hightower for the Reach. These are the 3 kingdoms that will also support King Aegon's war effort with their entire might. Rhaenyra then must turn to the other side of the realm. The North, the Riverlands, the Vale of Arryn, and the Iron Islands are all that will remain, if you don't count the lords of the Crownlands, who are already at the Black Council.
Tomorrow the Hightowers land their first blow. They force you to your knees.
War is inevitable. We then get a brief shot of Rhaenyra with her hair open looking out over the bleak narrow sea at around dusk. This shot is sort of reminiscent of the shot of Dany after she lost Rhaegal and became all despondent and inconsolable. Like it's got that same energy. But there's no time for grief, it seems, because Rhaenyra's war council is underway and we see one of her Kingsguard put a marker down at Winterfell. Now, this is important because while you may have assumed that you will never see the ancient home of the Starks once again, you might just be proven wrong. As we've already mentioned, Rhaenyra will need allies now that the war is all but inevitable. So she draws up plans to send envoys to every great house in the north and the east. Winterfell is the seat of the Warden of the North, and so it is imperative for her to win the Starks to her cause. They have some of the largest armies in the 7 kingdoms, and though their fighters are not anointed knights, they are deadlier than their southern counterparts. Rhaenyra will have to select her envoys very carefully, and you'll get that answer in a moment. For now, one of her lords urges her to lay siege to the Red Keep as we see swords being stacked in an armory at Dragonstone. It appears that the Black Queen will inevitably select war over peace.
Lay siege to the Red Keep.
Send us.
Envoys, dragons, and the crown of 2 kings. The next shot shows us Rhaenyra's eldest sons with their betrothed standing at the war council with their respective parents. Jace says, "Send us," and that is the answer to your envoy question. In Fire and Blood, the Black Council's first major hurdle was selecting the suitable envoys to represent them to their prospective supporters. In the end, it was decided that Rhaenyra's own sons would be the best champions of her cause, and Jace and Luke were given their missions. Jacaerys, being the eldest and the Prince of Dragonstone besides, was tasked with going to the Eyrie, the 3 Sisters, White Harbor, and, you guessed it, Winterfell. Daemon was already in the Riverlands gathering support at Harrenhal, and Luke, who was only a young child at the time, was sent to Storm's End to secure the support of Lord Boros Baratheon. It is the Black Council's belief that out of the 2 princes, Luke has the easier mission. Boros is the son of Bormund, who himself is Prince Rhaenys' cousin by birth. Storm's End was always a supporter of Rhaenys, who sits on the Black Council with her husband. So it only makes sense that Luke should be safe there, right? But the next shot shows you that all is not right, because Luke is running out of a fortress into its yard towards his dragon Arax, and he looks scared and eager to leave. And as if to foreshadow his fate, the next shot is of Vhagar, lifting her mighty neck over the castle of the Storm Kings of old. It appears as though Lucerys was late and his offer was an inferior one because the presence of Vhagar at Storm's End could only mean one thing. Aemond One Eye was also there. After that, we see the scene that we have been seeing since the first trailers of House of the Dragon came out. Sir Eric Cargyle presenting the crown of King Viserys and King Jaehaerys before him to Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen. Well, we suppose it will be Daemon instead of Rhaenyra herself, but you get our point. When we first saw the trailers for House of the Dragon, we thought this man was Sir Stephen Darklyn because Fire and Blood tells us that it is he who brings Rhaenyra the crown, but after watching the last episode, we can confirm that this is Eric Cargyle. This is an important scene because in A Song of Ice and Fire, things like crowns hold symbolic meaning. Though Aegon had been crowned with the Valyrian steel and ruby circlet of the Conqueror, that piece of hardware had a cruel history behind it by the time Alicent's son donned it. It was the chosen crown of Maegor the Cruel, and Jaehaerys made his own crown to distance his reign from his tyrannical uncles. Viserys took his grandsire's crown as an indicator of the continued peace that his own reign experienced, and the hope is that Rhaenyra would do the same. Her claim will draw legitimacy from her father's crown, as she was her father's designated heir. But whether her reign will be as peaceful as his will be a question mark in perpetuity.
I swear to ward the Queen.
The first dance of the dragon and the power of old Valyria. The next shot is of Lucerys Velaryon flying off on Arrax in a hurry. And you can see where we are going with this by now, can't you? For our TV show only audience, let us give you guys a hint. Remember the pink dread? Well, so does Aemond, and everything else that Luke has taken from him as well. Uncle and nephew will engage in a dance that has not been seen in nearly a century, since Maegor and his own nephew Aegon met beneath the god's eye. We then see multiple shots of Rhaenyra and her children at different times in the same location. So these council meetings are taking place one after the other. You can clearly see Baela and Rhaena in attendance in the shots that show the sunlight light up the painted table, whereas in the darker council meeting, you can just barely make out the silhouettes of Jacaerys and Lucerys. Oh, and speaking of Baela and Rhaena, don't think for a second that these young ladies will remain passive during the war. Oh no. Baela especially will remain at Dragonstone and strike what can be considered the most crucial blow to the Greens in the later stages of the dance. The dragonless Rhaena will be sent off to be fostered in Eyrie, but she will end up coming out of the dance as a symbol of hope, albeit a short one nonetheless.
Your cause owns a power that has not been seen since the days of old Valyria.
While all this is happening, we hear a voiceover telling Rhaenyra that her cause has a power not seen since the days of old Valyria, and this might be the same lord who was urging her to besiege King's Landing. Rhaenys was right when she said everyone will urge her to go to war, and this particular lord also makes a point that cannot be ignored. Rhaenyra's side does have the advantage when it comes to dragons. King Aegon, Prince Aemond, Prince Daeron, and Queen Helena are all dragon riders, but only the first three can be considered to be true fighters. Helena, as we have already seen, is not someone who will ride Dreamfire into battle, so that gives the Greens only 3 dragons overall. By contrast, most of the Blacks have their own dragons. Rhaenyra has Syrax, Jace has Vermax, Baela has Moondancer, Luke has Arrax, Rhaenys has Meleys, and young Joffrey Velaryon should also have bonded with his hatchling Tyraxes by this point. Then there is Daemon and his battle mount Caraxes to consider, and all the wild dragons residing in the Dragonmont, whom we will see in the sowing of the dragon seeds that should occur next season. Overall, Rhaenyra controls far more dragons than Aegon, and so the natural advantage for anyone who doesn't know them intimately lies with her. Her vassal is not wrong in assuming that she has more than a fighting chance, but there is emotion to consider as well. Daemon the Dragon Whisperer and the King's Peace. The next shot shows Daemon putting a torch down in front of Caraxes' face and singing him a song in High Valyrian. It appears as though Daemon is preparing his mount for the war to come, and Caraxes is eager for it as well, for he bellows out a stream of fire while Daemon just stands there looking like an ant in front of a dragon. This scene is interesting because it tells you that Viserys' assessment of dragons was partially correct. They are not creatures that men can tame. Men can only hope for their cooperation. Daemon has been been bonded with Caraxes for decades at this point, and both dragon and rider share a fierce closeness to one another. And yet, Daemon is the one who has to play to Caraxes' moods, not the other way round, which is the core of the argument Viserys was making. Between these two shots, we also catch a glimpse of Syrax and Meleys flying somewhere, possibly to Driftmark for an audience with Lord Corlys. We can say safely that it is Syrax and Meleys because of the former's yellow wings and the latter's literal crown of horns, which is visible if you look close enough. The next shot we get is a far more hostile recreation of that iconic scene from episode 2, where Otto comes to Dragonstone to reclaim the egg Daemon had stolen. You can see Daemon with the 3 Kings Guard, we know to have sided with Rhaenyra, drawing swords against the remaining members of Viserys' Kingsguard, who have arrived alongside Grand Maester Orwyle and Otto Hightower himself, by the look of things. This meeting between the two parties will most likely be about the peace terms that Alicent has arranged for Rhaenyra, as you will recall from the last episode. In Fire and Blood, it's only Grand Maester Orwyle that comes to Dragonstone, but it appears as though House of the Dragon wants to play up the Daemon-Otto rivalry even more than the books. Having the Leech of the Hightower arrive at the Alicent Citadel of the Dragon Lords must already piss Daemon off proper, but it will be the terms that will hold more importance during the episode. As you'll recall, we mentioned that Rhaenyra might just take Alicent's peace terms seriously, and that's because she will suffer a miscarriage. Just look at the shot of Daemon and Rhaenyra right before he goes to see Caraxes. Notice anything different? Rhaenyra's baby bump is missing. That's because when she receives word of Viserys' death, the princess goes into premature labor and ends up losing her 3rd child by Daemon to stillbirth. This will be doubly devastating for the prince himself, who was seen exulting last episode at the fact that Syrax had laid a clutch of 3 eggs, one for each of his sons through Rhaenyra. While it might be this stillbirth that weakens her resolve, it will be a different blow to the family that will steal her intentions, as the last shot of the preview shows you Vhagar closing her jaws at the night sky as the storm continues to rage around Duran's defiance. We think that the producers of House of the Dragon have pulled an MCU with this shot, as this might be the moment that Vhagar snaps the neck of a certain pearlescent white-winged creature, but that we can only confirm once the episode drops. Marvelous verdict. The preview for episode 10 had more dragons than most of the episodes of House of the Dragon in it, and that is all you need to see to know that war is at hand. The Black Queen will be an episode mired by grief, death, and the dragon's wrath, and we personally cannot wait to see how it all plays out. Most of the things that they have already shown in the trailer give away how the episode is going to end, because there is no way they are not ending the season on a high note. And what note could be higher than 2 dragons fighting each other? But that, like much else of what we discussed in this video, is something we're going to have to wait and watch out for. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.